There are certain things that we should not do, especially at night. If we do them, they can cost us our lives or send us to jail for the rest of our lives. Welcome back, everyone. Here we are going to tell you about a cursed story that you must never repeat, especially at night. So turn off your lights, get under your blankets, and listen to this story only if you dare. And don't forget that no one must hear this story after midnight. Otherwise, it will come true. Are you ready? Good. Let's start then. In the middle of nowhere, there was an old cottage surrounded by tall trees. Even the locals avoided passing by that place at night, because the road was full of bumps, and it was impossible to see when the fog rolled in. It was also said that many strange things happened around there, but nobody knew exactly what. However, all the townspeople agreed that no one should ever be wandering around those parts after dark. One day, a man named Jack decided to prove that nothing supernatural or spooky existed. So he told his wife, Mary, that he would buy some supplies in the next village, which was close to the cottage. But since the sun had already set, he would have to go through the forest path instead of the road. Mary tried to convince him to wait until morning, but he insisted on going that very night. So she let him go alone, although she was quite worried. As soon as he stepped out into the dark, Jack began to regret his decision. The wind was howling like a wolf, and the trees seemed to be watching him with malicious intent. He kept telling himself that there was nothing to be afraid of, that it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. However, he couldn't deny the feeling of dread that kept creeping up on him. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a baby crying in the distance. It was a mournful sound that tugged at his heartstrings. Although he knew it wasn't wise to stray from the path, his curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to investigate. As he walked deeper into the woods, the crying grew louder, and he could hear twigs snapping and leaves crunching under tiny feet. Then he saw it, a small clearing bathed in moonlight, and in the center of it, a rocking cradle. And Jack froze in his tracks. It was an old wooden cradle, intricately carved with scenes of mythical creatures. But what truly caught his attention was the baby inside it. A tiny infant swaddled in white cloth, rocking gently back and forth. The baby's cries echoed through the silent woods, and Jack felt an overwhelming urge to approach the cradle. He hesitated for a moment, torn between his fear and his desire to help the distressed child. But as he took a step forward, the crying abruptly stopped. The silence was deafening, and Jack could feel his heart pounding in his chest. Then the baby lifted its head and turned towards him, revealing a face that was pale and lifeless. Its eyes were wide and hollow, staring directly at Jack. He recoiled in horror, stumbling backwards, his mind screaming at him to run. But his feet felt heavy, as if anchored to the spot. He tried to call out for help, but his voice was trapped in his throat. All he could do was watch in petrified silence as the baby continued to stare at him, its expression never changing.
Oh, baby.
Then the baby began to speak in a voice that was raspy and ancient. "Please," it whispered, its gaze never leaving Jack's. "Please take me out of here." I wanted to help the child, but fear held him back. "Who are you?" he managed to stammer, his voice shaking. "I am lost," the baby replied, its tone pleading. "And I am cold. Please take me home." Jack hesitated, torn between his fear and his empathy for the child. But as he looked into its lifeless eyes, he couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. The baby was clearly in distress and needed his help. Taking a deep breath, Jack finally found his voice. "I will help you," he promised. The baby's face seemed to light up with gratitude, and it continued to stare at him expectantly. Cautiously, Jack approached the cradle once more and gently lifted the baby out of it. As soon as he cradled the child in his arms, he could feel a surge of energy course through his body. It was a strange sensation, both exhilarating and terrifying. The baby's weight seemed to grow heavier with each passing second, and its skin felt unnaturally cold. Despite the warmth of his jacket, Jack couldn't shake off the feeling that something was deeply wrong. As he carried the baby, he noticed that the clearing in the cradle had vanished, replaced by the dense trees and the familiar path. Relief washed over him, and he quickened his pace, eager to get away from the unsettling clearing. However, as he emerged from the trees onto the dirt road, his relief turned to shock. The moon was nowhere to be seen, and the sky was filled with an eerie green glow. In the distance, he could hear the sound of drums and chanting growing louder with every passing moment. Panic surged through Jack, and he broke into a run, stumbling over tree roots and fallen branches. He didn't dare look back, but he could feel the presence of the chanting and drumming closing in on him. His breath grew heavier, his legs burned with exertion, but he couldn't stop running. He had to escape that clearing, whatever it was and whatever it meant. As he ran, he could feel the baby's weight in his arms, becoming heavier and heavier, as if it were made of solid stone. His arms ached, and he longed to set the baby down, but he knew he couldn't. He had to keep moving, had to keep running. Suddenly, the chanting and drumming stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to amplify the sound of his own heartbeat. Jack slowed to a halt, his muscles trembling with exhaustion. He dared to turn around and saw that the clearing and the cradle had reappeared behind him. He stumbled backwards, horrified to realize that he had been running in circles. The baby in his arms was no longer crying, and it was then that he noticed its skin had taken on a sickly green hue. Its eyes, once lifeless, now glowed with an eerie light. With a sudden jolt, Jack understood that he was not carrying a baby, but something sinister, something that had used his compassion to lure him into this cursed clearing. The chanting started again, and this time Jack could make out the words, "Feed us with human heart." Terror gripping his soul, Jack knew he had to escape, to break free from the clutches of whatever evil he had unleashed. As the chanting reached a fever pitch, the baby in his arms began to grow, its form shifting and contorting until it resembled a grotesque parody of a human child. Its eyes burned with an otherworldly fire, and its mouth twisted into a demonic grin, revealing sharp, pointed teeth. Screaming in terror, Jack dropped the creature, stumbling backward. The creature hit the ground with a sickening thud, but it didn't cry out. Instead, it slithered toward him, its movements unnatural and disturbing. With a speed that belied its size, it lunged at Jack, its claws extended. In a panic, Jack scrambled back, tripping over the roots and rocks. The creature advanced relentlessly, its eyes fixed on Jack with a hungry gleam. And in that moment of sheer terror, Jack realized he was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no waking. We don't know what happened to Jack after that, but many people who live near that forest say that if you listen very carefully, you can still hear his screams echoing through the trees, a chilling reminder of the fate that befell him. Many years later, a young couple decided to move into the abandoned cottage in the woods. They had no knowledge of the horrors that had occurred there, nor of the curse that lay dormant within its walls. They moved in, unaware that they were about to become the next chapter in a terrifying story. One evening, as the sun began its slow descent and shadows stretched long across the floor, they heard a knock at the door. Startled, they looked at each other, wondering who could be paying a visit so late in the day. Whoever it was, they weren't expecting any guests. Cautiously, they crept closer to the door, their hearts pounding in their chests. As the knocking persisted, growing louder and more insistent, their fear began to mount. Finally, the woman decided to open the door, hoping to find a friendly face on the other side. But what she saw instead was enough to send shivers down her spine. Standing on their doorstep was a small child, no more than 5 years old, with an innocent smile on his face. In his hand, he held a small basket. "Hello," the child said in a sweet voice. "May I come in?" The couple exchanged a nervous glance, couldn't help but feel a sense of unease, as if something wasn't right. But the child's innocent eyes and the late hour made them relent. They invited him in, not realizing that they were about to make a terrible mistake. The child entered the house, and as he stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind him with a resounding bang. Startled, the couple turned to look at the door, but the child was nowhere to be seen. They searched the house, calling out for the child, but there was no answer. They found the basket by the door, and when they opened it, they found a small, intricately carved wooden toy. But where the child had gone, they couldn't fathom. Just then, they heard a knock at the door again, and this time it was followed by a raspy voice. "Let me in, please," the voice pleaded. "I'm cold and I want to play." The couple froze in their tracks. They recognized that voice. It was the same voice that had spoken to the previous owner of the house, Jack, before it consumed him. This time, the voice belonged to the woman. Years ago, the voice had tricked Jack into bringing it into the house, and now it was trying to do the same to them. They knew they had to escape before it was too late. But as they raced to the front door, they found themselves unable to open it. It was locked. The couple panicked, tried to force the door open, but it wouldn't budge. They were trapped inside the house with the entity that had claimed so many lives before. Trapped inside the house with the demonic entity, the couple's fear grew with every passing moment. They could hear the creature's heavy footsteps approaching their bedroom, its raspy voice echoing through the halls, chanting, "Come and play with me, forever and ever." They huddled together in the corner of the room, praying for a miracle, but none was forthcoming. The door burst open, and the creature glided in, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly fire. The couple screamed, but their cries were cut short as the creature silenced them with a swipe of its clawed hand. Their struggles were in vain. The creature was too strong for them. It dragged them toward the cradle it had used so many years before, its touch icy cold, draining the warmth from their bodies. As the first rays of sunlight peeked through the windows, the creature was satiated. It had claimed another 2 souls for its eternal game. The cottage fell silent once more, shrouded in an eerie stillness, the cradle rocking gently, as if coaxing another unsuspecting victim to its doom. And so the cycle continued, trapping those who dared to enter the cottage in an endless game of hide and seek with the creature that lurked within its walls.